told you I had unanswered questions. And I know people are like, she was found not guilty. Why don't you just leave it alone? Because I've got questions. And as long as I have questions and there's things that haven't been solved, I feel like we're never going to get justice for John O'Keefe. Now, this frustrates me because I don't have the answers to these questions, and you probably don't either, but let's brainstorm them together. Now, today's question is, were Chris and Julie Albert at 34 Fairview that night? Because according to them, they were, but also according to them, they weren't. The story changed halfway through, and now I don't know the real answer. I went down a rabbit hole. You don't even want to ask. I was looking for something. And so I went all the way back to the beginning, and I was going through my old notes. And then I saw some things I wrote down, and I thought, where would I have heard that? Where would I have seen it? So I revisited all the things I was researching at the time. I went back and listened to those podcasts again. I went and listened to all the news stories again. I went and retraced my steps to figure out why I would have written down something, a year and a half ago in a notebook that makes no sense today. And one of the things was, there's two things. There was the 5 a.m. phone call to Julie, and then were they at 34 Fairview? So Chris and Julie made statements to the police, and this is February of 2022. So this is shortly after, like days after John O'Keefe dies, but it's probably in that grace period, right? There's a whole lot of talking to the police in that grace period where they hadn't really figured out, we need to get our story straight, right? Because it was right after the incident where maybe Karen's probably going to get blamed. That's the way this is leaning. So I don't know that they had their guard up yet. And so people were just saying things and then later had to change their stories. Well, this is one of them. When Chris is interviewed, he says that he was at Waterfall and that they followed the group to 34 Fairview afterwards, okay? This is also the interview with police where Julie says, she's asked, how did you find out that John O'Keefe had died? And she says, well, I found out when Jen McCabe called me that morning. But then they got a hold of Jen McCabe's phone records and found out that that phone call from Jen McCabe to Julie Albert took place right around 5 a.m. Oopsie. At that point, John O'Keefe hadn't been found yet. So there's no way that Jen would have been calling Julie at 5 a.m. to tell her John was dead, would she? Yeah, so Julie has to change her story. In later testimony, Julie swears that she didn't answer the phone. Jen called her, because we've got the phone records. Jen called her. Julie says she didn't answer. There was no voice message. She said she really found out John O'Keefe was dead when she arrived at the home of Brian and Nicole Albert later that morning around 8:30 when she went to bring donuts to Brian Jr. for his birthday. But that's not why I'm making this video. I want to know were the Alberts, were Chris and Julie Albert at 34 Fairview, or at least Chris. So if they're at Waterfall and they follow the group back to 34 Fairview, why would Colin have to text Allie McCabe to come pick him up? And I've never really believed that Allie came to pick up Colin because I think those screenshots of the text messages were a little sus. But also her Find My Kid app, that 360 thing that's on her phone, showed her someplace else completely different. It doesn't show like any possibility that she was driving Colin home. So that's all a little bit flimsy. The later story would be Julie went home straight from the Waterfall. Chris stayed later. He walked home, and that they were both in bed by the time Colin came home. The story is that Colin left as the adults were coming in. And so as soon as everybody came from the Waterfall back to 34 Fairview, that's when Colin was like, hey, good to see everybody, I'm out. And he left. So he was not even there when John would have arrived, allegedly. Couple questions. If Chris and Julie, or just Chris, arrived at 34 Fairview, why would Colin need a ride home? Why couldn't he have gone home with his own parents? Why wouldn't he have stayed? His parents are there. Why wouldn't he have stayed? If Julie drove him home, my question is, if Julie left, Julie was there, Julie's like, I'm out. If she drove Colin home, how did Colin get there? Was his car there? Did his car stay there? Dad's like, I'll bring your car home. I'll be home. I'll be right behind you guys. He leaves his car there with his dad, and his dad's supposed to drive his car home. I'm just asking because Colin drives a Ford Edge. When did Chris leave? How did Chris get home? If Julie wasn't there and Chris was there, how did Chris get home? It's all a big mystery. Colin leaves and he goes home and says, when I got there, my parents were already in bed and I went up 3 flights of stairs to say goodnight to them. No, they weren't, because they left, according to them, they left Waterfall and went to Fairview. So either you passed them coming and going, because they sure as shit weren't home in bed by the time you got home, buddy. So their whole side of the story falls apart. But then I got to thinking, why would it matter? Why would it matter? Why would Chris Albert need to be protected? And I thought, oh, it's because he was on the Canton Select. No, he wasn't on the Canton Select Board at the time. He wasn't even running. This was a full year before he was even elected. So this wasn't having to do with his political ambitions. But Chris Albert is a convicted felon. He's done time for manslaughter. So if you're thinking about this in the panic of the drunken, oh my God, we just killed a guy moment, what do we do? And you're trying to figure out, what story do we tell? How do we get out of this? What do we do? Oh my God, what do we say? Chris Albert's got to be sitting there thinking, okay, you're a cop and you're a cop and there's a dead cop and these people are all young, innocent people. The only one here that's a convicted felon is me. The only one here that the entire public is going to think is capable of this, because I've killed a guy before, is me. I don't know if he had political ambitions at the time. I thought that maybe that's why he got out of there and they covered that he was never there. But I think it might be that Chris Albert's like, holy shit, I've already done time, guys. I can't be here. I can't be part of this. So that's when the story becomes Julie went home from the waterfall. Chris Albert was one of the last ones to leave. He walked home from the waterfall. Neither of them went to 34 Fairview. Colin got a ride home. He makes their alibi for them, like they secure each other's alibi. Colin says, I went home, my parents were in bed, and the parents can say, we were in bed and we knew Colin was safely inside the home. They secure each other's alibi that way. But I'm wondering if that's why all record, all conversation about Chris Albert being at 34 Fairview has gone away. Just some of my many unanswered questions. More videos to come because I got a lot.